Today, we're in a sermon series. We're in our fourth week of it called Christian-ish, where we're looking at these sayings that sound on their face pretty Christian. Sound like they're things that maybe a pastor said, likely a pastor said, maybe someone who follows Jesus said to you. Maybe you yourself have said. We did one a couple of weeks back where I said, I've actually probably said this many times. And so by virtue of saying them doesn't mean you're good or bad, but what we want to do is look at these and say, like, well, what did Jesus actually say? Because these are often born in things that have some truth. Even if they're half-truths or partial truths, and many times they're born out of goodwill and good intent, even if they evolve into something that takes on a life of their own. Like, the heart of them, I would have to believe, and I want to assume best and say that they were created and said as a way to draw people closer to Jesus, to talk about who God is and why God matters and how we're a part of this bigger story of what God is doing, and not just our life individually, but collectively. And one of those phrases that I've heard a lot is this one, that I'm not interested in a religion, I'm interested in a relationship. You may have heard that before. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, it's like a very post-religious, post-Christian area, and so a lot of my family would identify as spiritual but not religious. A lot of times when people would talk about their ideas of faith, they would say, well, this is about my relationship with Jesus. I'm not really interested in a religion. And we just did a whole 4-week series on Jesus versus religion, and so certainly it's more than a religion. But I also would say that hopefully it's more than just an individualistic relationship. Like, sometimes when we say this idea of it's not a religion, it's a relationship, what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of say, I've relinquished personal responsibility from you being a jerk. Or I'm relinquishing personal responsibility from the atrocities I see in this world, because truly it's only about me in Jesus. And I would say it certainly is about you and Jesus, but the hope is, and my challenge is, as we go through this today, I want you to take the idea of wondering, what would it look like if it was about me and Jesus, but my relationship with Jesus actually impacted the world around me? So our big idea, I think this will be on the screen with us, is saying it's a religion, not a relationship, often becomes an excuse to privatize our faith. But in a real relationship with Jesus always leads us to radical responsibility to our neighbor, to our community, and to the mission of God. And so this isn't just about you and Jesus. This is about all of us in Jesus. Like, this is something that is certainly starts here, starts with us, starts inside. But as we see with the followers of Jesus in biblical times, as we see in the book of Acts, as we'll explore a little bit, like, always the internal relationship predicates something that has, as we might say it, like a ground-shaking level of impact in the community around it. And so that's what I want us to explore here today. And so the phrase, it does get tossed around a lot. It does sound freeing. It actually sounds quite good in some ways. A thing, it's just between you and me and Jesus. But again, it sometimes, at its worst, could remove our ability to really see any sort of responsibility between me and my neighbor, between me and someone that disagrees with me, between me and anyone. And so before we dive into the sermon, we've done this, but we've taken a little bit of a break from this. I want you to actually, like, with someone next to you, maybe behind you, around the aisle, maybe you've not met them before, introduce yourself if you haven't. Maybe you just met them actually when you were shaking hands. But I want you to turn to someone around you and first start off with, like, have you heard this phrase before? And when you hear this phrase, what does it mean to you? Because certainly it means something to me. I built a sermon around what I think it means to me, but it might mean something radically different to you. And so I want us to be able to, with the people around us, start to build a scaffolding of where we're heading to see maybe someone else's perspective sounds or looks different than mine as we dive into this together. So have you heard this phrase, and what does it mean to you? Turn to someone next to you around the aisle, introduce yourself if you don't know. We'll come back together in just a second. I say this oftentimes when we have these, but it's fun to see when there's, like, energy around the conversation. This is one that I could presume you've either said or heard, just based on the energy of conversation that everyone had around. I think we probably could have just said amen, not preached, and you guys could have preached this sermon to yourself. It's not like you guys, just listening, you guys were on the right track. So, but when I think about this thing, and this idea of what we're tasked to with Jesus being solely a relationship, the heart of it I get, right? I mean, that's the reason we just did this whole Jesus versus religion series. Like, religion often can get it wrong. Religion can be about its own devices, right? It can be about serving itself and not actually caring for and serving the people around it. So that is certainly something that is true. But in any level of wrongdoing or injustice, whether that's systemically or racially or politically or religiously, like, the response of that pendulum swing is not to just privatize it, right? To become, well, I'm only going to worry about myself. Because that would be swinging from one extreme to this thing in this system is hurting me, to then I'm just going to isolate and become only interested in myself. And Jesus never framed discipleship in this way either. Like Jesus was pushing back against a system that was a little bit corrupt, a system that was broken, a system that wasn't really caring for its people well. And that's one of the reasons I've loved these sermon series that we've been doing over the last couple of months, because when we look at the brokenness of our world from systems of religion and whatever, Jesus would have understood that. Like a lot of things don't culturally translate. Like what Jesus was worrying about in the first century is certainly not what we're worrying about today, and there's certainly things that are different in the way that it expresses itself, but at the core level, Jesus was wrestling with this same challenge of a broken system that was not really serving its people well, and people on the outskirts, like the Pharisees, saying it's only about religion. Like it's not really, the relationship is maybe not very important. And there were other sects of Judaism that were pulling off, and they were saying, we're going to start our own thing, and it's going to become deeply personal. It's going to be only about me, and I'm not going to worry about anyone else. These kind of separatist groups were starting to form, and I think Jesus said, well, that's not really the answer either. And when Jesus talked about what discipleship, growing in him and growing in love of God and neighbor looked like, he said that it was always something that was communal. It was always something that was embodied. It was always something that engaged with other people. It might cost us something, but it always had some level of engagement with God and with neighbor. I mean, go back to Jesus' greatest commandment. He doesn't just say love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. He also doesn't just say love your neighbor with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, but there's this connective tissue that bonds these two things together. As you do one really well, you're actually able to do the other really well as well. So if I was going to give you kind of one of our opening points, I would say true relationship with Jesus is never just personal, but it is deeply participatory. And I want you to hear the just in there. I did not say that it is never personal. Like, it is certainly personal. It has something to say to us and about us. Like, Jesus wants to know us. I was just messaging with someone on our TikTok. They were reaching out to us, and I was messaging with them, and they're like, well, does God know me? Does God love me? I was like, God deeply knows you, and God deeply loves you. There is a deeply personal element to what is going on in our connection with God, certainly. But it is never just personal. It is always participatory. It's deeply participatory in the way that we love God and love neighbor. There's something actionable about it. But oftentimes, we like to remove the participation out of it, the responsibility out of it. And I wrestled with this word, responsibility. Was that the right word for this? And I know that it might be a little bit triggering to hear that, because what I'm not saying is you are forced to do this, right? Like we often say that you're invited but not expected to do things. And so when I say responsibility, the responsibility is something we're invited into. But I do think our faith predicates some sort of responsibility, but this idea of it being a relationship and not a religion, oftentimes, maybe on purpose, but I think many times inadvertently pushes away some of those responsibility aspects. So I want to dive into what some of those things kind of look like, and they might sound familiar to you. You might be like, I've seen this. You might be like, I'm doing this. I've certainly done every single one of these at some point in my life, and so you'd be in good company if you've done any of these. But this is what it kind of looks like when we have faith with no responsibility, when it turns only into a singular personal relationship that doesn't really worry about the people around us. It becomes really convenient, but not super committed. It becomes really convenient, but not super committed. It becomes about the time and the place, in the way that it's serving me, the place that I'm investing, or the place that I'm going, the style of music, the type of preacher, the kind of people that sit in the seats around me. It becomes something that is quite convenient. Like, I don't really want to give up my benefits. I don't want to give up my comfort. Like, I want this to become about me. And when we look at Jesus, Jesus was never really interested in comfort, but he was always interested in commitment. Right? And the way that Jesus lived his life was one that looked deeply committed and almost always uncomfortable. Right? When we look at the Last Supper that Jesus shared before he goes to the cross, he's surrounded by his closest friends and disciples, one of his friends that denies him, one that's going to betray him, and others that are going to doubt him, and others that are all sorts of messed up in different levels that probably didn't make it into the story because it was too long to write. But he's surrounded with this eclectic group of people around him. And I suspect that meal was not deeply comfortable for Jesus. I suspect it wasn't the most comfortable. Like taking time to wash the feet of his disciples before he was sharing this final meal. The disciple that was eventually going to betray him and hand him over. Maybe washing the feet of people that were surrounded with him that had let him down. Like, it wasn't something that was super comfortable, but Jesus was always showing up, always washing feet, always laying his life down, always doing these things that looked very committed to the people around him, even if they weren't the most comfortable thing. And John 15:13 kind of talks about this. He says there's no greater love than that, love that lays down its life for another person. Like talking about Jesus here in this life that he lived and the way that he went about it. But that is certainly expressed in his actions on the cross, right? He certainly laid his life down. He went to the cross. He was beaten. He was crucified. He was died and resurrected. But that's like a really big moment of a way for him to lay his life down. But he laid his life down in a myriad of different ways, right? Like whether he was cashing in his social credibility to stand up for marginalized people that didn't have voices in their time, whether he was creating seats and sitting with people that had been socially marginalized and outcast, whether he was healing the people that society had seen as untouchable. Like every space he went into, he laid something down and was deeply committed to this restorative work that God was a part of. It wasn't something that was just interested in making him comfortable. He wanted it to actually shape and shift the world of religion around him. But the other thing I think we often do is it becomes personal and not communal. Like it comes in this statement, it's a relationship, not a religion. Maybe that's like assumed within this, but it becomes something that's only about me. And when we look at the book of Acts, it's the greatest story of the birth of the church. It's one of the most frequently hit on passages, I think, at the Well, because I think it gives us an amazing picture of what community can and should look like. Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, paints this amazing picture. Jesus has died, he's been resurrected, he sent out the apostles, and they're building this church, and it gives this picture of what community looks like. And I'll give you a spoiler, it's like not just them sitting in their war room, their prayer room, their closed up closet with their books and talking to God all by themselves, right? They're sitting around tables and they're devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, which is who Jesus was and why he matters. And I say this tongue in cheek often, but they weren't doing sermon series about Christian-ish phrases. They were talking about the life of Jesus, who he was and why he mattered. They devoted themselves to that, right? They broke bread together. That meant they were in each other's spaces. They were in each other's lives. They were cooking and making meals. Cooking is like one of the most communal things to do. Like when my wife and I do it together, it's either the most deeply formative part of our day or we fight a lot, but it's definitely like very connected. Like we're in the room together and we're doing, it's something that is deeply communal, and they committed themselves to it. They also committed themselves to prayer together, which means they knew the joys and the concerns that were in people's lives. They were in every nook and cranny of each other's lives because they understood that what Jesus was offering them, though it personally transformed them, it was never just about them. There was something communal that he was challenging them and offering them to be a part of. But not more than just these two of convenient and personal. I think the last thing that often we turn this phrase into, and it looks like in real time, is it consumes more than it contributes. And I wrestled with this one a lot because this is another Christian-ish phrase that has been used to like shame people into participating more in the life of the church. And I know we just talked about kids ministry and we talked about all that. And so hear that and strip away any of the other things that might make it sound like I'm trying to force you to contribute. But when we look at like what it looks like to be a self-centered faith, it is one that is far more interested in about what is in it for me than what I might be able to give to help other people find the same thing that transformed me, right? Because that's what I love about this church. Like every single one of your stories, whether it's 1 week or all 4 years of our existence, you found your way into this church because something didn't feel right. Whether it was in your old church experience or you had never been in a church before and you felt this like tug and this nudge to feel like you might want to step back in, like there was something that led you to be a part of that, and you came in and you experienced something. And the people that I've noticed that have experienced it the most are some of those that are the most interested in making sure other people get to experience the same thing that transformed them. They want to not just take up their seat at the table, but they truly want to be actively creating more seats for others at the table as well. And this becomes an imperative of what it looks like to carry our faith forward. I think about Jesus in the Great Commission as he stands at the end of Matthew's gospel and he's telling his disciples what it's going to look like and where to go and how to live this life. He doesn't just say, now I want you to go and I want you to spend time worrying about this and how it personally impacts you. He doesn't ask them if you were going to die tonight, where are you going to end up? He doesn't ask them any of those kind of silly questions that Christians often ask that only have to do with us. He says, if you were deeply transformed by this, I want you to go out, both of you, 2 by 2, not alone, but in community. So there's community even in how they're sent out. And I want you to go and I want you to share the good news of who Jesus is and why he matters with every nation and every tongue and every region across the globe. It has something to do with reaching more people. The imperative is that as this thing transforms us, hopefully it compels us to go and to invite others to experience the same sorts of things. And so true relationship, I do think it offers us transformation in a lot of ways. And oftentimes we talk about like transformation from sin and brokenness, and in my own life I've certainly experienced that. There are ways that I felt like I was going down a path of destruction, and the way Jesus got into my life like deeply transformed it. But there are certainly other ways that Jesus speaks into our lives and transforms us, especially as we look at this phrase of relationship versus religion. And the first thing it transforms is it moves us from consumers into partners with what God is doing. Like we're no longer just people that are sitting interested in what it is for me, but we actually get to partner in carrying forward what God is doing. It's one of the reasons we talk about membership at the Well. We don't call it membership, and that's a little bit of like linguistics and semantics. But like this isn't a country club, right? We're not like selling memberships to come and to be comfortable. And we don't have a pool. It's super hot in here, so there's nothing country club about this place, right? It doesn't feel like that at all. But what we are doing is partnering and carrying the mission, the vision, and the value of this place forward. It's not about me, and it's not about any singular one of us, but we are all carrying this forward together. We're no longer just attenders, but we become neighbors. That's actually been my favorite part of this church, is that people have gotten to know each other. I used to tell us that like the first time we ever had church, it was at Good News Brewing Company, and it was in August. So you can imagine it was pretty hot like this. But we had a lot of people show up, and the first Sunday, like people just came, and no one knew anyone. And it was fun to like watch people sing and watch people talk and watch people participate. And like that was cool. We had over 100 people show up. It was this wonderful service. But what was really cool was the next week when people came back, and I watched them sit next to the person that they didn't know the week before. Someone that was a complete stranger, someone that to them they maybe would have never signed up to hang out with in their life. And now I look 4 years later, and those are some of our strongest small groups. Strangers that accidentally sat next to each other for a couple weeks and then said, I guess I kind of like you, and I'm going to do this journey of life with you. Like we no longer just people that are attending the same space together, but we're neighbors, like they talk about in Acts chapter 2, that are breaking bread together and praying together and sharing life and doing these things together. And then I think the last thing we do more than just becoming partners and neighbors is we become servants like Jesus was. We're not just people that are spectators. We're not just watching, but we're actually doing the feet washing Jesus did. We're doing the sharing of hope that Jesus shared. We're breaking bread the way Jesus broke it in people's houses to create hope and healing. We're not just spectating about what God could do, but we're active participants in the story of hope and healing that God is pushing and breathing out into the world. And I would say, as the screen says, that the fruit of a relationship with Jesus is visible through the way that we serve, we show up, and we share the way that he matters to us. And in a religion, it's often just about showing up to a space. And in something that's like actually embodied and relational and connected, it's about how we show up for other people, how we serve other people, how we share with other people the same way that he showed up for us, served with us, and shared with us in our life. And so oftentimes I think about like, well, what is Jesus inviting us to? Because I do think Jesus invites us to something. So what is he inviting us to, right? And he's certainly inviting us to abundant life. He's inviting us to something that's more full and more embodied, more life-giving when we ever knew it was. But sometimes I think we think that Jesus is inviting us to like do more and to work harder and to hustle a little bit till we're like exhausted. And what I would say is the invitation of Jesus is not to hustle harder, but it's an invitation to find belonging for ourselves and help others find belonging as well. The belonging that so deeply matter to us that we might be able to go and share that with someone else. And a quick little caveat, we did a sermon series a while back, and I talked about love. And one of the things I said is that Jesus talks about how we need to love our neighbor as ourselves. And we did a whole sermon on what it means to love our neighbor well. And someone from the congregation came up to me afterwards and said, hey, that was a great sermon, which I love hearing. Thank you for sharing. But she came up to me and said, but I don't know how I can love people like I love myself if I don't love myself? And what I would say to that is that's 100% true. Like, the challenge of Jesus is not to start loving people before you know how loved you are. Like, there's not to go out and to work harder because Jesus loves you so much he wants to burn you out and break you for the sake of the kingdom. Like, there is a reality in saying there is a season to rest and a season to sit and a season to understand and know just how loved you are, how known you are, and how much that matters to you and impacts you and transforms you. And the challenge is that begins to take hold and root in who you are and transform you in the ways that aren't just in word, but are in action and thought and in deed and everything. And then, and only then, are you a part of that challenge to go and share with other people. And so my challenge to you would be this, to first be, if this is your first time ever hearing this or hearing it with like fresh ears that like God knows you and God loves you, like first embrace your own belonging. The idea and the reality that God knows you and God loves you and that you belong just as you are. There's no caveats, there's no exceptions, there's no asterisk next to that. Like, you are loved and you belong just as you are. And the challenge on the other side of that would be as you begin to embrace that and know that it becomes like a part of who you are, like a second language, a part of your DNA, this knownness and loveness, then I would invite you to live into that challenge, to share and to extend a helping hand and a hoping hand and a loving hand to a world that often feels hopeless, a world that often feels broken and isolated, like there's not enough love to go around, to people that feel isolated and alone and like they're a stranger to any friends, that we might be the loving friend that could offer them the love of Christ. That as we find belonging, we might offer that to other people. And so as I look at this passage or this phrase rather, of it's a religion, or a relationship and not a religion, I think in many ways that is certainly true. And the best thing that relationship offers us is the reality there's a God that deeply knows us and loves us and wants to be a part of every single one of our lives. And as messy and broken as religion can be, which it certainly can be all of those things, the best religion can offer us is the community. Like at its core, it offered us community. And my hope and challenge would be that we could see the synergy of those things. The connection to Jesus and the community that's offered, just like Acts in chapter 2, that we get to journey together, breaking bread and sharing prayers, the joys, the concerns, the good, the bad, and the ugly, every part of life as we journey this walk of life in faith together. So with that in mind, would you pray with me? God, I thank you that you do invite each and every one of us, just as we are, to your table, that you know us deeply and intimately. Sometimes we don't feel loved or lovable, we don't feel known or knowable, but God, we know that you are always there with us. We often talk about inviting you into the space and praying your presence into the room, but one thing we know, God, is that you are already here and you are already with us, and you have always walked alongside us. And so God, help us see your presence. Help us experience your goodness in tangible and profound ways. And God, as that love and that blessing begins to take a hold of us, we ask that you would help us be compelled to share it with those who don't know love, who don't know hope, who don't know belonging or friendship, that we might share all the things you have shared with us with those who so deeply need it. And so God, be with us as we continue to worship, prepare our hearts for communion. Pray us all in Jesus' holy name.